Live.
All right. No. Now I'm going to get going here today. This one's going to be, I need to introduce this just a little bit. Last Sabbath, I'm going to make a confession. A couple things, it was made known to me. A few things were made known to me. And in the way it was made known, it angered me. I wasn't happy with it. I did something that's rather uncharacteristic. I did rant and rave, but mostly to myself. My poor wife had to listen to it. But I was pacing the floor, and on Sunday, I was given a correction. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to repeat the mistakes of the past. What do I do? First things first, I calmed my booty down because the scripture says not to do anything in anger. So I calmed down. And then I went back and I heard the whole correction. I calmed down and I listened to it very carefully, took notes and everything. Then I did exactly what I've always asked people to do. I took it to the scriptures to test it. And I found it sorely wanting. And then I realized what the real thing that was irking me was. So today we're going to go back over something we've covered before. Only this isn't really what I'm teaching. I am teaching the highest level lesson I have ever taught a group of Yahweh's people. And when we get done, I'm going to see if anybody realizes what I was actually trying to teach. And this is a day where I'm not going to worry about that clock. We're going to get through this lesson. We'll go from there. Passover and Unleavened Bread. The question is, do we have a proper understanding of the sequence of events surrounding the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread? And to what degree of certainty can we understand this issue correctly? How certain can we be that we know it correctly? Before we begin, a little groundwork. We should start by setting some ground rules. First, we should approach this study with a Torah-based Hebrew understanding of the scriptures. Okay, if we're not thinking like a Hebrew, it's going to be hard for us to understand a Hebrew document. Second, I am not sola scriptura, scripture alone believer, like Luther and some of those others. I believe that you have to sometimes go outside of scripture. However, for the purpose of this study, I propose we stick to the scriptures as much as possible, taking the whole of scripture into account, and only going outside of scripture when necessary, and then we should seek the minimum of help required. So like definitions of words and things like that, but as best as possible, we're going to stay in the scriptures. Finally, we should offer a great deal of grace toward each other, making sure to keep a humble and teachable heart, and remember that we are seeking to understand Yahweh's word, not to bend it to ourselves. Be careful of traditions and the teachings of man, brothers and sisters. The goal is to learn while at the same time maintaining fellowship throughout our study. After all, we cannot break bread. If we can't break bread together after we're finished, we shouldn't have even started. One last note. All scriptures cited in this study are taken from the NASB translation of the scriptures and from Bible Hub's interlinear scriptures and lexicon. I'm using Bible Hub because they also give me the BDB, Brown Drivers Briggs, right there on the page. And I have tried to restore the sacred names, so I have altered the NASB translation a little bit. Now, for those of you who were not in the military, big warning. I will be teaching this lesson by the numbers, which is the Marine Corps' way of saying stupid simple. It's not meant to be an offense. It's meant to make sure we keep it clear. But I mean, this morning I realized it's not as simple as I wanted it to be. Let's begin. We're going to start here. We're in Leviticus 23, verse 1 and 2. Yahweh spoke again to Moses, saying, "Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, Yahweh's appointed times, Moedim, which you shall proclaim as holy convocations, my appointed times are these." Moedim. That's going to be definitions and concepts. We're going to start right here. Moed. It's Strong's Lexicon 4150. Pronounced, if I've got this right, Moed, stress is on the ed. It means an appointed time. We often translate it as a meeting, assembly, or a festival. This is where part of our problem is going to come in, right here. It means an appointed time, a fixed time. We also can translate it as a season or a festival. And conventionally, it's a year, an assembly, technically the congregation, the place of meeting, etc., etc. I took this from Bible Hub, Usage. The Hebrew word moed primarily refers to an appointed time or place. This is very important. This is one of the things where sometimes we get, we're Elohim instead of gods, how that causes trouble in our moed should sometimes be thought of when we're dealing with the feast, because when we think feast, in the conventional English usage of feast, that's not the same thought as a Hebrew moed. Am I correct?
You're absolutely correct.
And if you now they're very closely related.
They're closely related.
But if you think they're the same thing, you will get sideways in this study. Guarantee. I did. Everybody I know has, because we're thinking of it like a modern Greek cultured English speaking. So it's often used in context of sacred festivals, often used religious gatherings or divinely appointed meetings. It signifies a time set apart for a specific purpose. Now, the time can vary, and that's part of the problem. And often involving worship or remembrance. In the context of the tabernacle and temple, moed can also refer to the tent of meeting, where Yahweh would meet with his people, a set apart place or time. The moed can be the tabernacle. Cultural and historical background in ancient Israel, moed was integral to the religious and communal life of the people. Israelites observed several moedim, plural of moed, which were divinely appointed festivals such as Passover, the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Tabernacles. These festivals were not only times of worship and sacrifice, but also served as reminders of Yahweh's covenantal relationship with Israel and his acts of deliverance and provision. The concept of moed underscores the importance of time and place in the worship of Yahweh. Y'all get that? Feast doesn't necessarily have the same connotation. Moed underscores the importance of a time and place in the worship of Yahweh, emphasizing the rhythm of sacred time in the life of the community. This is also closely the Sabbath. The seventh-day Sabbath is a moed. So this is one of the things where our brothers and sisters in the visible church screw up. Moed means an appointed time. Remember this. Look, Rick, I learned how to put an invisible, transparent background sticker on my slide. Don't tell anybody. Back to the scriptures. We're still in Leviticus 23, still verses 1 through 3 this time. Yahweh spoke again to Moses, saying, "Speak to the sons of Israel, saying to them, Yahweh's appointed times, his moedim, which you shall proclaim as holy convocations, my appointed times, moedim, are these. For 6 days work may be done, but on the seventh day there is a Sabbath of complete rest, a holy convocation. You shall not do any work. It is a Sabbath to Yahweh in all your dwellings." Definitions and concepts. Sabbath, or in this case, Shabbath. Strong's Lexicon 7676. It's an intermission, to cease, or the Shabbat, the Sabbath. Can mean both. But the big point we want to look at is it's a cessation. Cease working. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I'm only going to do this one time. But I think the main thing, Yahweh is talking to Moses.
Yep.
Yahweh is talking to Moses. Yahweh is talking to Moses. This don't have anything to do with the Jews. This don't even have anything to do with Israel, except that she's supposed to keep it. But Yahweh, these are Yahweh's appointed times.
Yes.
That's it.
She'll be
back.
You know what's coming. Usage, the term Shabbath or Sabbath primarily refers to the seventh day of the week, a day of rest and cessation from work as commanded by Yahweh. It is a holy day set apart for rest and worship, commemorating Yahweh's rest after the creation of the world. The Sabbath is a sign of the covenant between Yahweh and Israel, serving as a reminder of Yahweh's creation and deliverance. Cultural and historic background. The Sabbath is deeply rooted in the Hebrew tradition and Torah, originating from the creation narrative in Genesis and codified in the Ten Commandments, Exodus 20, 8 through 11, Deuteronomy 5, 12 through 15. It was observed from Friday evening to Saturday evening, marked by the rest from labor by worship and family gatherings. The Sabbath was a distinctive feature of Hebrew identity and religious practice, emphasizing rest, reflection, and renewal. Sabbath means to cease. Remember this. Still in Leviticus, now in verse 4. These are the appointed times, moed, of Yahweh, the moedim, holy convocations which you shall proclaim at the times appointed. Moedim, for them, appointed. Times appointed. It does say Moedim in the Hebrew right there. That's why I put that there. Therefore, we are to proclaim the Moedim at their appointed time. Proclaim the appointed times at their proper time. Clarification. We should be very careful with the concept of Moed. We usually translate it as feast, but that is not always the best way to think of the concept. It would be better to think of it in terms as an appointed time or a period of time, sometimes a place, when dealing with the term Moed. Warning, we are about to grab a third rail with both hands. If you're familiar with me, you know I don't care about this. Let's go to this passage. Exodus 12, verse 1 and 2. Now Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, this month shall be the beginning of months for you. It is to be the first month of the year for you. Now I'm going to jump to Exodus 23, verse 15. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. For 7 days you are to eat unleavened bread, as I commanded you, at the appointed time, at the Moed, in the month of Abib. Now, pay attention to what I'm saying. Don't start running with me. Just you can run later. Follow me. For in that month you came out of Egypt, and no one is to appear before me empty-handed. Definitions and concepts. Abib, Strong's Lexicon 24. It means an ear, green, or a young ear of grain. That's what's important. It's not the name of a month, as Rick pointed out. Usage. The term Abib refers to the stage of growth in grain, particularly barley, when the ears are still green and tender. It is also used to denote the first month of the Hebrew calendar, which corresponds to March through April of the Gregorian calendar. This month is significant as it marks the beginning of the harvest season and is associated with the Passover festivals. Cultural and historical background. In ancient Israel, the month of Abib was crucial for agriculture and religious reasons. It signified the start of the barley harvest, which was the first crop to ripen in the spring. The timing of the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread was linked to the state of the barley crop. It says linked, that's all, as the offering of the first fruits was a key component of these celebrations. The month of Abib was later renamed Nisan after the Babylonian exile. Abib means green or young ears. It is linked to the barley crop, but it is not the name of the month. Warning, we're about to grab another third rail. Question. How are we supposed to determine the first day of Abib? Spoiler alert, I am not going to provide a definitive answer to this question in this study, because that's not actually the point. Time to chase a wabbit. I love chasing wabbits. Concerning the luminaries, Genesis 1:14. You two can read that, yes? Moar? Yeah, I put that in there.
No, Ma'or.
Ma'or, but I put that in there for you. We have this passage, Genesis 1:14 through 19. We all know it. Then Elohim said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and they shall serve as signs and for Moedim and for days and years, and they shall serve as lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth. And it was so. Elohim made the two great lights, the greater lights to govern the day and the lesser lights to govern the night. He made the stars also. Notice how I changed. I didn't read seasons. It's a proper translation. It is there to also set the seasons, but I read Moedim for a reason, because it's in the Hebrew. The Hebrew says Moedim. Well, if you're just going to think seasons, you're going to think summer, spring, fall, and winter. That's where we get ourselves in trouble. Note, we are told the lights are to determine the days and years, but before that, the seasons, the Moedim in Hebrew. However, we are not told which light governs which period. That's nowhere in Scripture. So let's look for help. Let's try this passage. Well, it's nowhere in Genesis, excuse me. Psalm 104, verse 19. He made the moon for the Moedim. The sun knows the place of its settings. This is Hebrew parallelism, and in other words, the moon determines the Moedim, and the sun determines the phase of the moon. That's it. These are the only relevant passages I could find for setting the calendar in the Scriptures. Remember, sola scriptura? That's it, boys and girls. Nowhere, not in the whole of Scripture, does Yahweh's word mention the use of either the sun or the equinox to set the Moedim. And that is all I'm saying. That's the only thing I'm saying. That using the sun or the equinox to set the Moed is not found in Yahweh's word. So, see, I tilted my lettering. Now, let's set this whole issue aside and get back to our study. Let's look at the timing of Passover in the Exodus. The question, what is the proper order of the Passover, Exodus, and Feast of Unleavened Bread? What order does it happen? So we're going to go back to the scriptures. We're in Exodus 12 now, verse 1 through 3. You're going to see a repetition of these scriptures as I focus on different passages at different points. Now, Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, this month shall be the beginning of the months for you. Oh, wait a minute. That's exactly how we started in Exodus 23. Yes, I know. This month shall be the beginning of months for you. It is to be the first month of the year for you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, they are, each one, to take a lamb for themselves, according to their father's households, a lamb for each household. We continue. Your lamb shall be an unblemished male or a year old. You may take it from the sheep or the goats. You shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. I underline that word for a reason. You're about to find out why. This is one of the reasons people misunderstand this whole idea of the timing. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel is to slaughter it at twilight. Moreover, they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel of the house in which they eat it. Definitions. You know me, you know I love definitions for a reason. What we have is until is had. Strong's Lexicon 5704. It means until, as far as, up to, while, during, as far as or up to a given point in time. Let's reread this. Keep going. Your lamb shall be an unblemished male, a year old. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. You shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel is to slaughter it at twilight. Moreover, they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and the lintel of the house which they eat it. Back to definitions. Twilight. Ereb. Strong's Lexicon 6153. Why am I doing to this? You're going to understand. We're laying the groundwork. I'm doing the work that we should do when we study. I'm showing you what I've done to study this issue. I'm going to explain all of it when I'm done. But this isn't really the lesson I'm trying to teach. Definition means evening or dusk. Usage. The Hebrew word Ereb primarily refers to the time of day known as evening, which will get us into a whole furry ball of wax when we talk about between the evenings. That's not for today. It marks the transition from daylight to darkness. It is often used in the context of the daily cycle, signifying the end of the day and the beginning of a new one, according to the Hebrew reckoning of time, which starts at sunset. Cultural and historic background. In ancient Hebrew culture, the day was considered to begin at sunset, making the Ereb a significant marker for the start of a new day. This understanding is rooted in the creation account in Genesis, where there was evening and there was morning the first day. Genesis 1:5, using the BSB translation. Remember, this is directly out of Bible Hub. Evening was a time for rest and reflection after the day's labor, and it is often held religious significance, as many Hebrew festivals and Sabbaths begin at sundown. Summary to this point. Take a lamb or a goat on the 10th of Aviv. Keep it 4 days, up to the 14th of Aviv, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 4 days. Therefore, logically, slaughter it at twilight on the 14th, up to the 14th. Not until the 14th, which in our colloquial term means 5 days. The way we use until would mean I keep it 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 until the 14th. That's not what the Hebrew word says. You see where the problem's been coming in?
Oh, yeah, that's good.
We keep reading.
Good catch.
Exodus 12:8. They shall eat the flesh that same night. This word is not in there. That's a gloss. When you see them non-bold in italics, that's a gloss. You shall eat the flesh that night. But same works. That's to help us understand in our modern day. Roasted with fire, and they shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. It's matzah. That's in the Hebrew. That's what it says. Another point. We are to eat unleavened bread with the Passover sacrifice. Remember this. Summary to this point. The year starts on the first day of Aviv. We take a lamb on the 10th day of Aviv. We slaughter it on the 14th of Aviv at twilight. We eat the Passover meal with unleavened bread on the 14th day of Aviv. Now, have I done any scriptures that anybody got a problem with this? We're good?
Leviticus 23 does not have get a lamb. There's a reason for that.
All right, but do we have a problem with the timing? Okay. Next passage. Exodus 12:10. And you shall not leave any of it over until as far as morning. This is where one of the problems seems to be entering. We would read that as you're not supposed to leave it until morning comes. The Hebrew says you're not supposed to leave it. If morning comes and you still have it, you're goofed. Where a lot of us get the idea is you got to go outside to burn it. Not in their houses. You stick it in the oven. Okay. But whatever is left of it until morning, you shall completely burn with fire. Definitions, concepts. Is that Bakur? It's Boker? Boker. Strong's Lexicon 1242. Morning, dawn or morning. And again, the Hebrew word Bakur primarily denotes the time of day known as morning. It is used to describe the period of dawn or early daylight, often associated with the beginning of a new day. In the biblical context, Bakur signifies not only the literal morning, but also symbolizes new beginnings, renewal, the faithfulness of Yahweh Elohim, as his mercies are renewed every morning. Lamentations 3:22-23. Cultural and historic background. In ancient Israelite culture, the morning was a significant time for various activities, including prayer, offerings, and starting daily labor. The morning was seen as a time of hope and renewal, reflecting the cyclical nature of life and Elohim's creation. The Israelites often began their day with morning sacrifice and prayer, acknowledging Elohim's provision and seeking his guidance for the day ahead. Before we go to this next passage, one of the problems we have with this idea of morning is we think sun up. Usually is. You ever been in the Middle East? That's not morning to those folks. Ahmed starts screaming in the morning when there's 2 hours of nighttime left before the sun comes up. That's morning to them. They're up and moving. If you're a farmer, sometimes morning is way before that sun comes up if you're going to feed the animals on time. Yes, brother?
Yeah.
It does happen. If you tell a Marine or somebody in the Army, hey man, 0 dark 30, it's in the morning. What time is that to him? Anytime 1 second after 12 to 1 second until noon is morning when I was in the military. This is a loose, and it's the same way with the Hebrew. That's one of the problems. Don't force your idea of something onto the scriptures until you know it fits. Keep it loose until you can know it fits. So we're going to go back to Exodus 12, starting in verse 11. Now you shall eat it in this way, with your garment, and it doesn't say that. It says you shall eat it belted around your waist, but we've put the gloss in there. Belted around your waist, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in a hurry. It is Yahweh's Passover. For I will go through the land of Egypt on that night, and fatally strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the human firstborn to animals, and against all the Elohim of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am Yahweh. Definitions. I want to know what they mean by night. Got several different words here. Layil or
usually the way it's
all right.
used.
It means a twist or night. Adversity. It can mean several things, but nighttime. So I want a little expounding from Bible Hub. This is the Hebrew word layil. Primarily refers to the period of darkness between sunset and sunrise, commonly known as night. See, it's another loose term. It is used in the Bible to denote both the literal time of the night and metaphorically to represent times of trouble, ignorance, or spiritual darkness. There was the darkness and there was light, the night, dark night and day, whatever, Genesis. The term is often contrasted with day to illustrate the cycle of time and duality of light and darkness. And historical background is in ancient Hebrew culture, the day was divided into two main parts, day and night. Nighttime was a period of rest and reflection, but has also carried connotations of danger, uncertainty due to the lack of light. The Israelites, like many ancient peoples, relied on the moon and the stars for navigation, timekeeping during the night. Night was also a time for storytelling and passing down oral traditions as families gathered around the hearth. Some clarification. That's your Hebrew day. Start of the day, end of the day. We don't think this way. We've got to learn to think this way when we're reading the scriptures. This is the Hebrew mind. These are loosey-goosey terms, all three of them. And I do mean that, loosey-goosey. In the scriptures, that's a loose term. Because this can actually start when the sun's still up. Summary to this point. We're to eat the Passover in a state of preparation. We eat the Passover meal with unleavened bread. We are not to leave any of the sacrifice up until the morning, until the morning comes. Yahweh will strike down the firstborn that night. Now, it did say that, right? It's going to strike it down that night. Okay. Next passage. Exodus 12, verse 14. Now this day shall be a memorial to you, and you shall celebrate it as a moed to Yahweh. I left the feast out. I'm going to go with moed. Throughout your generations, you are to celebrate it as a permanent ordinance. Passover is a moed, one appointed time. We are to keep it forever. We're going to remember this. Exodus 12, verse 15. Next verse. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. But on the first day you shall remove dough with yeast from your houses. For whoever eats anything with yeast from the first day until the seventh day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. Exodus 12, verses 16 through 17. I'm continuing the passage. And on the first day you shall have a holy assembly, and a holy assembly on the seventh day. It doesn't say another in the Hebrew. It says you shall have a holy assembly and a holy assembly on the seventh day. We put the gloss in there so it makes sense to us. No work at all shall be done on them, except for what must be eaten by every person. Otherwise you can cook. That alone may be prepared by you. You shall also keep the feast, or the moed. This is not there in the Hebrew. You shall keep unleavened bread. This is where a lot of us stumble. Not saying everybody. That right there where there's a lot. This is that point that I was like, you shall keep unleavened bread. For on this very day I brought your multitude out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall keep this day throughout your generations as a permanent ordinance. Stop. Contradictions. At this point, it would appear as though it's going to do it on the day of unleavened bread. But we were just told Passover. And nobody argued with we're going to eat it on Passover. But that's the day. There's a contradiction in here for people who are just reading on the surface. It appears as though the day we eat the Passover is the first day of unleavened bread for some people, and that the Passover starts the feast of unleavened bread, as though they're one and the same. And that together there are 7 days of that moed. We're going to need some clarification. And I'm not saying this is your understanding, brothers and sisters, but I have run into this confusion over and over and over again.
Let me just add something here. When you were in, I think it was verse, what was it, 17 there?
Okay.
Yes. Where it says keep, I prefer to use a different word that's used in this translation. It's called guard.
Guard it.
Because we're supposed to be making sure we're doing this
Preserve
exactly like we're supposed to. And that's what this is about here, is teaching to make sure that we understand how this is supposed to be done. Because a lot of times when we read keep in our English today, it just means, okay, we're just supposed to do this. It's stronger than that in the Hebrew.
Yeah,
that's my point.
You tell this old jarhead guard, you better not come close to it without
exactly.
the proper password.
That's
You will get shot.
It's stronger in the Hebrew.
Yes.
That's my only point.
So therefore, let's read the passage again, then determine exactly what it says without reading our preconceptions into this passage. Back to Exodus 12:15.
12:17.
For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, but on the first day you shall remove dough with yeast from your houses. For whoever eats anything with yeast from the first day until the seventh day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. Now verse 16, and on the first day you shall have a holy assembly, and a holy assembly on the seventh day. No work at all shall be done on them, except for what must be eaten by every person. That alone may be prepared by you. You shall also guard the unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your multitudes out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall guard this day throughout your generations as a permanent ordinance. Summary to this point. We are to eat unleavened bread for 7 days. This is the moed of unleavened bread. We are to guard or keep this day as a memorial. But which day? Unleavened bread is 7 days. Well, is Passover part of it? Or are we supposed to keep it? I've run into brothers and sisters that think it's 7 days and that it starts with Passover. I've run into this. It is the day Yahweh brought the people out of Egypt. Which day? Caution. If you ever get to a point where it appears that the scriptures are contradicting themselves, you're missing something. The scriptures will never contradict themselves. That means they're broken. So what are we missing? We keep reading. Exodus 12, 18 through 51. I don't think I go all the way through 51, but it's just, I captured the whole section. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, so this is the verse right after the one that we were dealing with, at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. That's 8 days. But they just said 7 is the moed of unleavened bread. Starting to get pieces of the puzzle. We keep reading. Now we're going to do Exodus 12, verse 19. For 7 days there shall be no dough with yeast found in your houses. For whoever eats anything with yeast, that person shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel. Whether he is a stranger or a native of the land, you shall not eat anything with yeast. In all your dwellings you shall eat unleavened bread. Well, wait, is it 7 days or 8? It's a legitimate question. Yeah, yes. But it is a legitimate question. For people who don't know how to study this scripture, who's never been taught, and all they're doing is reading it, it can be easily confusing. So contradictions, at this point, we may still be confused. The 14th through the 21st is 8 days. But we're told to eat unleavened bread for 7 days. What are we missing? We need some help. So we're going to look for help first in the scriptures first. Always in the scriptures first. Now we're going to jump back to Leviticus 23, verse 4. These are the appointed moed of Yahweh, holy convocations, which you shall proclaim at the times appointed for them. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at twilight, is Yahweh's Passover. Then on the 15th day of the same month, there is the moed of unleavened bread. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. So we've got 8 days here. Leviticus 23, 4, 6 appears to differentiate between Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It calls them 2 different moed, meaning they are 2 distinctly different periods of events. But let's keep reading the scriptures for more clues. I'm going to jump to Numbers 9, chapter 9, verse 1. Now Yahweh spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month of the 2nd year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying, now the sons of Israel are to celebrate the Passover at the appointed moed, appointed time. On the 14th day of this month at twilight, you shall celebrate it at its appointed time, start of the day. Twilight starts the day in the Hebrew month. You shall celebrate it in accordance with all its statutes and all its ordinances. Continuing, so Moses told the sons of Israel to celebrate the Passover, and they celebrated the Passover in the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at twilight in the wilderness of Sinai. In accordance with everything that Yahweh had commanded Moses, so the sons of Israel did. That seems pretty clear to me. The Passover is to be eaten at twilight on the 14th day of the first month of Aviv. That's the beginning of the day, of the Hebrew day. Passover is a single moed. Starts at twilight on the 14th. Remember, you keep it for 4 days up until the 14th. Then you have it you sacrifice at twilight, the start of the 14th of Aviv. It lasts 1 day. It is a day. So we're going to remember that. Numbers 28. 16 through 17. Yahweh's Passover shall be on the 14th day of the first month. On the 15th day of this month, there shall be a moed. Unleavened bread shall be eaten for 7 days. That also seems fairly clear to me. The moed of unleavened bread starts at twilight on the 15th day of the first month of Aviv, lasts for 7 days. So unleavened bread is a single moed starting at twilight on the 15th of Aviv and lasts for 7 days. Remember this. Here's a second witness in one continuing passage, Leviticus 23, 4 through 8. We're jumping back. These are the appointed times of Yahweh, holy convocations, which you shall proclaim at the times appointed for them. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at twilight, start of the day, Yahweh's Passover. Then on the 15th day of the same month, there is the feast, the moed of unleavened bread for Yahweh. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Leviticus 23, verse 4 to 8 continued. On the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall not do any laborious work. But for 7 days you shall present an offering by fire to Yahweh. On the 7th day is a holy convocation. You shall not do any laborious work. There. Have our answer. Passover starts at twilight on the 14th day of the first month at the last, and lasts for 1 day. The moed of unleavened bread starts at twilight on the 15th day of the first month, lasts for 7 days. So let's go back and reread this passage using what we now know. Exodus 12, starting in verse 16. And on the first day of unleavened bread, you shall have a holy assembly. First moed, and another holy assembly on the 7th day. No work at all shall be done on them, except for what must be eaten by every person. That alone may be prepared by you. You shall also, in addition to, keep that's not there, keep the moed. That feast is not in there. You shall keep unleavened bread. This must be Passover. Because it says the first day. For on this very day I brought your multitudes out of the land of Egypt. Previously we had said it's going to be the night he eats that you eat the Passover. Therefore you shall guard this day throughout your generations as a permanent ordinance. This is where we get ourselves messed up. We're thinking that, you must keep the unleavened bread. Well, that's the 7 days. Then why does it say also? Also means in addition to. This is going to be confusing to people who don't slow down and let it sink in and read what it's saying, not what we're saying. So we know what matzah means, right? Strong Lexicon 4682, unleavened bread. Guess what also part of the definition is? The festival of Passover. That's in the definition. It's in the lexicon. So why do so many believers seem to have so much trouble with this? I did at one point. I did for a long time, for several years, even after coming to this congregation. Maybe it's because we no longer live in an ancient Near East culture and we don't understand the language, the way they used it, or even how they lived. So I'm looking for additional clarification. This time I'm going to go to something else. Over time, and this is just something I know, the Feast of Unleavened Bread became a colloquial expression. It became a general term used to refer to the whole 8-day period where we are commanded to eat unleavened bread. In the New Testament, Passover and unleavened bread are often used interchangeably. And in the New Testament clearly tells you in all three of the synoptic gospels that the first day of unleavened bread is Passover. I've got the passages later in the lesson. Colloquial. It's a characteristic or appropriate to a spoken language or to writing and speak. It's the way we talk. It's the way we use the language. Pertaining to or used in conversation, especially common and familiar conversation, conversational, hence unstudied or informal. Kind of like not quite the way we're talking now, because this is a formal setting. It's like dinner table talk. In the same way, unleavened bread came to apply to the whole 8-day moed, or moedim in this case. Passover became a colloquial expression for the Exodus from Egypt. The scriptures we have today have been edited. So we have to allow for the fact that you're going to need to switch here, Caitlin. Switch over to the other file at this point. There might be some editing in here that's also causing continual confusion. So we have just covered passages in Scripture that very clearly define Yahweh's first two moed or moedim, Passover and unleavened bread. Those are two different moed. These same passages also define the order of these moed, Passover, then the 7-day unleavened bread. Therefore, all passages in Scripture dealing with these moedim must be held up to justified against them. In other words, everything else that we're going to find in Scripture that might be confusing, we need to hold them up against what we now know. We do know there are two moed. Passover and unleavened bread are two moed. They're 8 days total. Passover is 1 7-day moed for unleavened bread. Everything else we ever read is going to have to be held up against this. Because unless somebody tells me I missed the Scriptures, and nobody's said anything about me teaching it wrong. We've gone through it by the numbers. So this is just good exegesis. It's sound logic. It's also the best way to keep us from misunderstanding Scripture. We've got a very clear passage. We hold up everything else to it. So if we get another passage that we read and it says, well, that says something different, I'm going to go, we don't understand something between the two. That means stop and work it out. And until you have that harmonized, you don't go anywhere with that subject. You don't start jamming Scripture into holes. This is because it helps us to ensure that we build a sound understanding of Scripture as a whole. Don't forget that lesson. Another important point. We're going back to Exodus 12, 15 through 16. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, but on the first day you shall remove dough with yeast from your houses. For whoever eats anything with yeast from the first day until the 7th day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. And on the first day you shall have a holy assembly. And a holy assembly on the 7th day. No work at all shall be done on them, except for what must be eaten by every person, that alone prepared for you. The first day of unleavened bread, the 15th of Abib, is a Sabbath day of rest. We already covered the definition of Sabbath. We are to cease, do no work, with the stated exception of cooking. Don't forget that this command was given before they left Egypt. I see a lot of brothers and sisters that forget this. That's important. Back to our study. Next question. What was the order of the events that night in the first Passover, Exodus, unleavened bread? And in this case, I'm using Exodus to mean when they start to leave Egypt. I don't mean, see, this is another colloquial. What exactly is the Exodus? So we think everything all the way to Sinai. Exodus is actually the day you leave. But the whole period has become a colloquial. We have already answered these questions, but let's look again for more detail. Let's go back to the scriptures, and this time we're going to start here in Exodus 12, verse 21. Then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said to them, go and take for yourselves lambs according to your families, and slaughter the Passover lamb. And you shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood, which is in the basin, and apply it, some of the blood that is in the basin, to the lintel and the 2 doorposts. And none of you shall go outside the door of his house until morning. What did that just say now that we've learned a lesson? Up until morning. So in other words, you don't go outside your house at night. When's morning start? Don't jam an assumption into scripture. Just read what it says and try to understand it as a whole. It will give you the pieces to put it together. It's the glory of Yahweh to hide a thing. It's the glory of kings to dig it up. Exodus 12, 21 to 28 continued. For Yahweh will pass through to strike the Egyptians. But when he sees the blood in the lintel and on the 2 doorposts, Yahweh will pass over the door and will not allow the destroyer to come into your house to strike you. And you shall keep this event as an ordinance for you and your children forever. When's Yahweh coming through to strike the Egyptians? Tomorrow night? 3 nights from now? A year from now? Or that night? It's that night. And the scripture will tell us. So we continue. When you enter the land which Yahweh will give you, as he has promised, you shall keep this rite. And when you guard your right, well, children say to you, what does this rite mean to you? Then you shall say, it is a Passover sacrifice to Yahweh, because he passed over the houses of the sons of Israel in Egypt when he struck the Egyptians, but spared our homes. And the people bowed low and worshiped. So it's that night. Summary. Moses seems pretty clear on this order. The Israelites are to eat Passover sacrifice. Later that same night, Yahweh will slay all the firstborn in Egypt. Keep reading. Exodus 12, 29 through 32. Now it came about at midnight on the 14th of Abib that Yahweh struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the cattle. And Pharaoh got up in the night, one of those loosey-goosey terms, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was no home where there was not someone dead. Continue. Then he called for Moses and Aaron at night, same night, 14th, and he said, rise up, get out from among my people, both you and the sons of Israel, and go worship Yahweh as you have said. Take both your flocks and your herds as you have said, and go and bless me also. So what night does Pharaoh tell them to get out? Tells them to get out sometime in the night of the 14th. Now, here's where we got to be thinking about those loosey-goosey terms. They're not supposed to get out of their house until morning. But Pharaoh gets up about midnight, calls for Moses in the night. As long as there's no sunlight up, that still works. Summary to this point. Again, the scriptures seem clear. The Israelites ate the Passover. Yahweh slayed the firstborn in Egypt. Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron that same night. Conclusion, this all happens on the 14th of Aviv. Note, this matches with the understanding we've already derived earlier, but we're going to keep reading to make sure. Exodus 12, verse 33 through 41. The Egyptians urged the people to send them out of the land in a hurry. Leave that night, which is Yahweh told the people to eat the Passover, dressed ready to flee, because he knew it was coming. For they said, we will all be dead. So they're afraid. Get out of town.
Eat the Passover in a hurry.
Yep. So the people took their dough before it was leavened with their kneading bowls bound up in the clothes in their shoulders. This is where your common sense comes in. I ate it in a hurry. I'm ready to go. All the timing in this tells me that when the people died in Egypt, Pharaoh got up, calls for Moses, says, get the heck out of Dodge. All the Egyptians are scared. Everybody go. Just get out of here before we're all dead. They're scared of Yahweh.
The Egyptians were telling them, get the heck out of here before we die.
That's what common sense tells us. Remember, this is real people. This is real world. Now the sons of Israel had done according to the word of Moses, for they had requested from Egyptians articles of silver and articles of gold and clothing, and Yahweh had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they let them have their requests. Therefore they plundered the Egyptians. Note, we're not told when Moses told them to do this. This is the first that's mentioned. Don't write anything into it that you don't have a reason to write into that. Just accept it. Now the sons of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Sukkot. I looked that up. How far? You looked that up. How far is that?
Less than 10 miles.
Yes. Now, in some
Medium
cases,
terrain,
they're in the general region of
livestock. You can do that in a day.
They're in the region of, was it Goshen? Goshen. The Sukkot is right on the eastern border of Goshen, which means there are going to be some Hebrews that just have to get up, get outside, and cross the street. They're at Sukkot. So it's a mixed multitude also went with them, along with flocks and herds, a very large number of livestock. And they baked the dough which they had brought out of Egypt in cakes of unleavened bread, for it had no yeast, since they were driven out of Egypt, could not delay, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves. So that's all going with what we're thinking. Now, the time that the sons of Israel had lived in Egypt was 430 years, and at the end of 430 years, on this very day, all the multitudes of Yahweh departed the land of Egypt. That's what I think of as the Exodus. So the summary. Scriptures still seem clear on the timeline. The people ate the Passover sacrifice. Yahweh slayed the firstborn. Pharaoh got up in the night, summoned Moses and Aaron, and the Egyptians urged the Hebrews to leave great haste. So all these things happened on the night of the 14th of Aviv. Additional clarification. Isaiah 1:18, let us reason together. Do you remember when I told you, do not forget this? The day following Passover, the 15th of Aviv, is a Sabbath day of rest. It was commanded before they ate the Passover. Yahweh had commanded, you will do no work, with the stated exception of cooking. Moving the nation of Israel and the mixed multitude and all their livestock is a lot of work, brothers and sisters. I've been involved in moving 800 Marines with vehicles, and that was a lot of work. Moving this by foot. Is Yahweh lawless? No. Does Yahweh change? No. Then why would Yahweh command his people to work on the Sabbath day of rest, especially after he just told them they're not going to work on that day? He didn't. Why is that important? No, the answer is he wouldn't. Therefore, we should accept the text on its face value. Israel left Egypt on the night of Passover, the 14th of Aviv. Thus, to me, it would seem the scriptures are describing an Exodus timeline that looks like this. The beginning of the 14th. That's the moed of the Passover. Passover meal. You burn your whatever's left over somewhere in this time before morning.
Probably before midnight even.
Probably. Pharaoh gets up, tells them to leave. They leave. They have their rest. This is the moed of unleavened bread. Colloquially, all 8 days are called unleavened bread and Passover. And in the New Testament, that holds, which is exactly where I got this picture from. If you remember when I showed you my understanding right from the scriptures of the crucifixion night, day, or whatever, does that not match perfectly with what I brought out of the scriptures in the New Testament? That's where I got this picture from. Some possible objections to my understanding. People who might say, well, Joe, hold on. Objection number one, the people could not go outside before morning. We remember this passage. None of you shall go outside the door of the house until morning. I think we've already dealt with that. I hope we have. But therefore, the objection is the people can't go, they can't leave the night of the 14th because they're not allowed to go outside until sunup, and that's when they have to burn their sacrifice. Resolution is simple. First of all, we've covered this. You shall not leave it, any part of it, up until morning. It's supposed to be gone before morning, whatever morning is. And whatever is left up till morning, you shall completely burn with fire. That can be done in the house. And it's supposed to be dealt with before morning. Why do I say it can be done in the house? Let's understand the scripture without a contradiction. When we understand the Hebrew, we got to get rid of it before morning. It means up to morning.
Right.
But I'm not supposed to go outside until morning.
And you're supposed to eat it in a hurry. So,
well, I'm not even worried about the hurry. Whatever's left over before morning, I've got to burn without going outside.
But what I'm saying is if they're eating it in a hurry, they're going to be burning it
right,
like 9, 10 o'clock at night maybe.
But so, what I'm going to give that here is Yahweh's going to give them provision for this.
Yes.
Given in the culture they live, they have a fire in their house. Yeah, they just burned it in the house, folks. Yep. That's all. It's a simple solution. Definitions and concepts. We've already covered that one. Remember? Up to. So we could translate Exodus 12:10 this way. And you shall not leave any of it over as far as morning, but whatever is left over as far as morning, you shall completely burn with fire before the morning comes. In other words, eat it before morning, but if you don't, burn it before morning. That works. To which those who object with my reply might say, but the people cannot burn the leftover sacrifice until the sun comes up, because Moses told them to stay in their house until morning. Therefore, they would not have been able to. It's the only one you've caught so far. To leave Egypt that night. Here's another possible resolution. The command to stay inside was most likely understood as stay inside until after the death angel had passed. Why do I say that? Because of the rest of the scriptures we have. Otherwise, scripture would appear to have Moses breaking the command to stay in until morning when he goes out to speak with Pharaoh in the middle of the night. Because we're told that's sometime in the night, in the middle of the night. So did Moses break the command Yahweh had to stay in until morning?
No. And Moses, of all people, would have known when to go out.
Exodus 12:29. Now it came about at midnight, thereabout at midnight, that Yahweh struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. And Pharaoh got up in the night, he and all his servants, and all the Egyptians. And there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was no home where there was not someone dead. And then he called for Moses and Aaron at night, and said, rise up, get out from among my people, both you and the sons of Israel, and go worship Yahweh, as you said, take your flocks and your herds, and as you have said, and go and bless me also. Again, the resolution is found in a careful reading of the whole of Scripture. And then the definition of night and morning, which we previously covered. Those are very fungible, loose terms. And if Moses is using night and morning in a colloquial sense, then the early morning can still be thought of as part of the night. This is the Hebrew watch. This is morning. That starts somewhere around 3 in the morning our time. That's also night. 3 hours is a lot of time to get things done, folks. I'm not misreading the scriptures. We've got folks that are objecting because they're not applying other legitimate possible understandings of stay in the house until morning.
And even if they didn't start moving until sunrise, the distance from Sukkot, from Ramesses to Sukkot, they could do during daylight hours.
Yeah, you can make about 2 miles an hour,
Yeah.
even with cattle. Given the wording of the text, this seems to be the most reasonable interpretation of the way Moses was using night and morning. He's colloquially. Therefore, there would be no contradiction in the way I am presenting the meaning of the scriptures in this lesson. So that objection's dealt with. Objection number 2. Psalm 136 depicts the Passover and the Day of Leaving as two different events. This is Psalm 136, verse 10 and 11, the two verses in question. To him who struck the Egyptians, that is their firstborn, one event, for his faithfulness is everlasting, and brought Israel out from the midst, for his faithfulness is everlasting. 2 events. That's the claim. Psalm 136 clearly states Passover and bringing out of Israel are 2 different events. Therefore, they must have happened on 2 different nights. Resolution. Here's the first place, other than with definitions, where some knowledge outside the scripture can help. Most of the Psalms are poetic, so it helps us to have some understanding of Hebrew poetry. In this case, I'm thinking specifically of Hebrew parallelism. However, if we were to read the whole of Psalm 136 carefully, we don't need to go outside to understand this. Psalm 136, verse 1. Give thanks to Yahweh, for he is good, for his faithfulness is everlasting. That's the refrain in all of this. Give thanks to Yahweh, for he is good. Give thanks to Eloah of Elohim, the El of Elohim. Give thanks to Adon of Adonim, the Lord of Lords. This is one thought in 3 verses. That's Hebrew parallelism. It means Yahweh's above all. Go to verse 4. To him alone does great wonders. To him who made the heavens with skill. To him who spread out the earth above the waters. Yahweh the Creator. To him who made the great lights, the sun to rule by day, and the moon and stars to rule by night. He created the luminaries. It's one thought, 3 lines. To him who struck the Egyptians, that is their firstborn, and brought Israel out from their midst with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. That's one thought. That's the rescue from Egypt. And then when you're done, every 3 verses in Psalm 136 all comes down to one single thought too. Yahweh's greatness and his providential care of Israel. So Psalm 136 does not necessarily present Passover and Exodus as 2 separate events. If it does, it forces you to break with Scripture. Because we've already shown in Exodus and Numbers and in Leviticus, the pattern is clear. So if you're going to now say, well, Psalm 136 says it's two different events, that breaks with it breaks with Exodus 12 and Leviticus 23, clearly, just breaks with them. That's a contradiction in Scripture, which means this is not the way to understand it. And therefore, there's no contradiction in the way I've presented the meaning of Scriptures in this lesson. Second objection is dealt with. The third, Scripture says Yahweh brought Israel out on the first day of unleavened bread. Now here's where we're going to go back to something I was pointing out earlier. Exodus 12, 17 through 51. You shall also keep the feast of unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your multitudes out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall keep this day throughout your generations as a permanent ordinance. See? Told you. First day of unleavened bread. Well,
I believe that on this very day is a Hebrew idiom.
I know, and you're ahead of the lesson plan. But what if I go back and put the Hebrew in here? It says, you shall keep the unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your multitude out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall keep this day throughout your generations a permanent ordinance. Remember, I left out the feast because that's not in the Hebrew. Resolution. We've already covered this, but first, there's a peculiarity found in the structure of the Hebrew behind this translation. Thanks to Rick for teaching me this. Essentially, it does not mean a day, a yom, a 24-hour period as specific 24-hour period of the calendar. Rather, it refers to a general time, a moed, when Yahweh acts, and it is parallel to the prophet's thinking when the day of Yahweh or the day of the Lord. If you understand the prophetic language, the day of the Lord or the day of Yahweh is any day Yahweh acts or does anything. So if we were to go back to that one passage, this is the day I brought you out. Well, when did he bring you out? The first day of unleavened bread or the whole 7? Thankfully, we don't need to rely on any of these details to resolve this objection. All we have to do is keep reading with a Torah-observant Hebrew mindset. Exodus 12, back to your verse 17. You shall also guard unleavened bread. Also, in addition to the 7 days. Remember, verse 15, 16 tells us 7 days of the moed of unleavened bread. You shall also guard unleavened bread. For on this very day I brought your multitudes out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall keep this day throughout your generations as a permanent ordinance. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. That's 8 days.
Yes, it is.
Guard unleavened bread is another way of saying you shall guard the Passover.
Yep.
So what night did he actually bring us out? Passover. Might help to read the passage this way. I've changed it a little bit. For on this very day I brought your multitudes out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall keep this day, one day, throughout your generations as a permanent ordinance. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall also eat the unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. It's an 8-day, which is how Passover and unleavened bread became synonymous by the time of the New Testament. See, the Hebrews don't say feast of unleavened bread. It just says unleavened bread. The feast was we added. We are commanded to eat unleavened bread with the Passover meal. So that is the first day of unleavened bread, just as it says in Matthew 26:17, Mark 14:12, and Luke 22:1 and 22:7. It calls Passover day the first day of unleavened bread, clearly in all 4 passages. It is also the 14th day of Aviv, the first day of unleavened bread. Do you remember when I told you not to forget this? We are to eat unleavened bread with Passover sacrifice. Therefore, Exodus 12:17 can legitimately be read as referring to the night of the first day of unleavened bread, which is actually the 14th of Aviv, the first of the 8 days of unleavened bread. Furthermore, this understanding would harmonize with all the other passages that clearly state the Hebrews left Egypt on the night of the 14th of Aviv. Finally, it avoids the problem of Yahweh commanding the Hebrews to violate the command he had just given to rest on the 15th of Aviv. Therefore, I submit that there would be no contradiction in the way I have presented the scriptures in this lesson. And I maintain that the Hebrews started their flight from Egypt while it was still the night of the Passover, 14th of Eve. Now, this is the first event and the one night to be remembered, for scripture says one night and not 2. Exodus 12:42, it is a night to be observed for Yahweh, for having brought them out of the land of Egypt. This night is for Yahweh, to be observed by all the sons of Israel throughout their generations. It doesn't say Yamim, it says Yom, one night. Then all the sons of Israel did so. They did just as Yahweh had commanded Moses and Aaron. And on that very day, Passover, 14th of Eve, Yahweh brought the sons of Israel out of the land of Egypt according to their multitudes. Furthermore, I have stayed wholly within the scriptures. I have stuck to the whole of the scriptures to do this, and I've harmonized every relevant passage without adding to or taking away from them. Now, you're going to have to decide for yourself, because that's the end of this. But this was not the lesson I was trying to teach. I was told that I'm going to have to keep growing because I need to understand that they had the Passover and they left on the night of the 15th. And then I need to learn that those are 2 different days, 2 nights to be remembered. And I went and I looked through all of the scriptures that I could find on this. The scriptures never call it 2 nights to be remembered. They call it a night. And the 3 points I was told, those are the 3 objections I used, they don't hold up to scrutiny against scripture. I did my job to be a Berean. That's not the lesson I'm trying to teach. Does anybody in this room have any idea? And some of you don't know what's going on. I've got that. Does anybody in this room have any idea what it is I'm trying to actually get at here?
So you're trying to show people how to read the Bible.
That's one thing.
Correct.
Yes, that's a big part of it.
And how to view the passage of time and how it works in our world.
Hold on to that. Yes,
Keep learning.
keep learning is a very good one. Because I hear all the time from people, I've been at this longer than you, Joe. Is Yahweh a respecter of persons?
Means nothing.
Is he a respecter of how long you've been in the walk? We have brothers and sisters in the visible church who have been there longer than we've been alive, and they still don't understand the Sabbath, right? Now, we're not going to judge their salvation, but they're still babies at the very least in their understanding Yahweh's word. And we know this. But just because we've understood more doesn't mean we've got it all. We haven't arrived yet. The minute we think we've arrived, you've quit growing spiritually. Now, here's the real test for you. If you happen to be one of the folks that thought, I have this wrong, come to me with the scriptures and show me a different order. And I'll test it. And if you're right, I'll change. But if you can't do that, are you going to change? Because you need to. If you're one of those ones who still thinks that this is a 2-night event, it's going to have you eating the Passover meal on the evening of the 15th. The end of the 14th, beginning of the 15th, like the Jews did in the New Testament, in the Gospel of John, which is why he called it the Passover of the Jews. And you're going to ignore Yeshua saying several times in the 3 synoptic Gospels, he was eating the Passover with his apostles on the beginning of the 14th. So what you're going to do is you're going to choose the Pharisees over the Messiah. And it will screw up your crucifixion week as well. It'll screw up everything we're supposed to guard. Now, is that salvific? A misunderstanding of the scriptures is not necessarily salvific. A refusal to study them in detail with a clear mind and let them talk to us, and then to talk with each other, to really steel sharpen iron, to help each other better understand in a way that allows us to continue to break bread. If we can't do that, that's a salvific issue. That, I believe, is because that's dividing the kingdom. And it's also undermining your own understanding of Yahweh's word. That's what I'm after. So if somebody thinks that I'm still wrong, I want to see the scriptures. And I can assure you, I pulled up every passage in the NASB that said Passover. Every passage that said unleavened bread. And I went searching for anything that might contradict my argument. Some of you have been with me for a long time. Some of you have only known me for a few years. I don't bring you anything and stand on it this strong unless I can back it up. Is there anybody in here who has any inkling in their mind that they think they can break this understanding of Scripture? So there might be some people in this congregation that need to change their understanding. There's the test. Are we humble enough to learn from each other? I've learned from people in this congregation. I have. I've also run into brothers that have been at it for decades, And I knew they were wrong, and I couldn't get them to even stop and look at it. And they left over something that should not have made them part ways with us. And it's clearly in the scriptures. I gave them, I'm not going to get into detail with it, but I gave them a passage straight out of Paul that addressed that particular issue that was a stumbling block to this person. And the person wouldn't even read the passage, wouldn't even read it for me. And I mean, it was a apples to apples. It was even a granny apple to granny apple comparison. It was exactly what Paul tells us. They'd rather part ways than amend their understanding. We cannot grow as soon as we tell ourselves we got it and everybody else is wrong. You are now sitting in the crosshairs of 2 Thessalonians 2. Man of lawlessness who has assumed the seat of Yahweh and has said in their heart, I've risen on high. I can now tell Yahweh what he means and what he doesn't mean. That'll get you in trouble, brothers and sisters. Thoughts, comments, questions, suggestions?
This isn't really anything about trying to break your understanding of it or anything. It's just about the night and day cycle. Like night and day around here kind of changes drastically every 6 months.
You've been in the desert? It changes a lot.
Yeah. That's
And
what I'm trying to get at.
even in the summer where the sun comes up earlier, if you're in the lee of a mountain, that sun might not pop up and over that mountain until 9 o'clock in the morning when everybody else has already got everybody fed and they're already working. The desert is weird. The desert is weird. And then when the sun goes down in the desert, again, if you're in the lee of a mountain, it goes down early. If you're not, if you're looking at just the horizon, when the sun goes down in the desert, it goes down, Jack. You can actually watch it.
It goes down like that here if you watch it.
Especially on the water.
Yeah.
But what I'm asking is for like,
The idea is if we take a rigid understanding with no room for flexibility in our world, and we jam it into the ancient scriptures living in an entirely different environment in a different culture, and we say they have to adjust to the way we're thinking, guaranteed you will mess something up. Guaranteed. 100% every time.
that's what I'm trying to get at is like, in order to like keep the Sabbath, keep the Passover, is there a time frame when you should start versus, or is it just sunset period?
Remember that little yellow Post-it note I said, let's save that for another day?
Remember we made a little change on when we held the Passover meal this year?
Yeah,
We
you held
changed
it
it from
at
7
6.
o'clock to 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Because I originally set it based on the rigid understanding of sunset. But Mama Joe said, can we do it earlier at 6? And I looked at Joe and I said, according to the Hebrew understanding, yeah, we can. So
Okay,
we
so-
changed it.
This is why I spend a little time to go over the meanings as best we can understand it today. That's how they would have thought of these terms.
It
So
would have still been.
There's
evening.
flexibility in those time frames.
try to keep it evening, night. Okay.
Yeah. Do the best you can.
That makes sense.
There's flexibility in there. They're not, and like I said, we skipped the issue of between the evenings. Holy cow,
that's
is that?
gosh, that's a whole.
That's a Hebrew
nother
phrase,
argument.
between the evenings. Which evenings? Is it between tonight and tomorrow night?
Yeah.
Or is it
That's-
between, because you see there's
It can
different
be.
evenings in their time.
Yeah.
There's starts at about 3 in the afternoon and goes till the sun sets.
That's the kind of thing that would trip me up. Absolutely.
Well, that's what morons like me and scholars like Rick and Ray like to dig up, because now you got to go wading through the rabbis' writings and the history books to find all
That's
of that.
part of why I'm here, because I'm looking for somebody to help me see my way.
But what I did today was I stayed as much as possible sola scriptura. I stayed in the scriptures. The only reason we came out was for definitions.
He showed
Exactly,
you
and that's-
today
and that's
proper
what you do.
exegesis of the scriptures.
This was a by the numbers. This is how you do it.
This was in excruciating detail how you should approach the scriptures.
Right.
All right. Are we good for now? All right, Caitlin, we're done.